Visits cost you 40 whole hours in College Football 25, but are they worth it? That is a question everybody's been asking for months in Dynasty mode, which means I had to run a quick experiment to see. Now, I initially set out to answer the question, are visits in Dynasty mode worth it? But by the end of this video, you'll see why I don't even think that's the right question to ask. Instead, the right question and what we went and found out is exactly how much of an impact a visit could make, and the single thing that determines most of that impact. Now, if you're a returning viewer of this channel, I'm sure you already know exactly how I went about answering this question. Just like usual, we grabbed two identical schools, Arizona and Arizona State, made brand new head coaches, kept them identical, and then put them both in the same dynasty in the same season so we could control both. Each team recruited the exact same 37 prospects, and each recruit was targeted equally by the two teams until that recruit reached their top 5. Once there, all we had to do was flip a coin to decide if Arizona or Arizona State was going to be the school that scheduled the visit. So if Arizona is the school that's hosting the visit, Arizona State would throw exactly 25 hours towards that recruit when they were visiting Arizona. That way we're going to be able to compare the impact of a visit against the impact of 25 hours of regular recruiting action. Now, the main reason why I approach visits this way is because they are not nearly as black and white a concept as some of our previous experiments. When we were testing if you should hard sell or send the house, it really was an either or situation. Depending on the context, one was definitely going to be better than the other. However, visits aren't really the same because it's a question of where those 40 hours could also go to. Like, maybe you're going after the top player in the nation as a super small school, so any bonus you get from a visit is going to be worth the 40 hours instead of putting it towards another 2-star. Or maybe you're an elite school and you have nothing but hours to use, and maybe you just want to get these guys to commit ASAP, so you use your visits. Because there's so much gray area here, I think the best strategy is allow you to decide when you should or shouldn't do a visit, and instead today, let's just answer the question how much of an impact that visit could make. And based off this experiment where we compared visits to 25 hours of regular recruiting actions, we are left with this interesting plot that honestly raises more questions than it answers. So what you're seeing is a bunch of points, and each point represents a single player in this experiment. The vertical axis represents how much better or worse of an impact that visit made on influence compared to the 25 hours of recruiting action. If that point is way above the line, that means that the visit from the visiting school way outperformed the 25 hours from the other school for that player. And if it's below the line, then really it didn't do much compared to just 25 hours of regular action. But why are the points scattered horizontally too? Well, similar to past experiments, we took the letter grade of the pitch that was used for that prospect and then converted it into a number. So all the way over on the right, those are visit grades with like an A or an A- for whatever pitch we used on that visit. And down here are all the recruits who had a really bad grade on whatever we used to pitch them. And also, just for your context, I only chose pitches that had a green check mark. I didn't even mess with anything that was red. Now, when I saw this plot, I was incredibly confused. I initially thought that the better of a grade you had for that pitch for that visit, the better the visit would go. Like if the recruit had an A+ grade for proximity to home, and then we did a family visit as the action, I figured that would be a lot more effective than doing something that we had a C- grade on. Well, this graph actually argues the opposite. If the grade of the visit was all that mattered, we would see a nice diagonal relationship where the better that grade was for the thing that we pitched on the visit, the better the visit would go. So what the heck is happening here? Well, check out how awesome the underlying story is. So here's the graph right now that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It looks like just kind of two separate lines, but look at what happens when we color the data points based off the outcome of the game for each visit. All of a sudden, this story is making a lot more sense. When you host a recruit on a visit, if you win that game, that visit is going to have a much larger impact than the 25 hours of regular recruiting actions, regardless of the letter grade for the pitch that you used on that specific visit. But if you lose, you basically spent 40 whole hours for a fraction of the influence that 25 hours of regular recruiting actions would get you. And finally, it looks like if you have recruits on a bye week, it's kind of treated like a loss, and therefore there's not a whole lot of influence there either. In fact, if we were to group each of these by the result of the game and then take the average result, we're left with this view. Again, if you win that game, the potential influence gain for that recruit is massive. But if you lose, it's not going to be nearly as good as just throwing 25 hours at the player. But Max, what about all the other aspects of a visit? Like, what if you have 4 complementary players, or if you win in a blowout compared to a close game? Well, based off this, I cannot say for sure that those things don't matter. Like, they probably do have some amount of impact on how much influence you gain from that visit. Like, if you look at the visit summary, it does seem like some of those things play some sort of factor. So yes, I still would much rather schedule an activity that's an A+ green check mark than than a C- green check mark on that visit. And if I could get a couple complimentary visits, I think that's better than nothing. That being said, if you want to know whether or not your visit is going to have a lot of influence or very little influence, we could get very close to the truth by knowing one thing. Did you win that game or did you not? Now, as a player of College Football 25 myself, I actually kind of like that logic now because it makes visits a fun risk that don't always pan out. Now, at this point, there's no more science. This is just my opinion, but I think in my own dynasties from here on out, there's one case where I'm always going to schedule a visit and two cases where I'm going to try and avoid it. If I am targeting an elite prospect early in the year and I have a matchup that I think I really can win, then I am 100% going to get a visit going. 4 and 5 stars at a small school are definitely worth a visit, and I may try to schedule my easy home non-conference games in weeks 3 through 5 so I could try and do the visits as early as possible, because most of the time they're not ready for a visit in week 1 and 2, and I think week 7 and 8 is too late. On the other hand, there are still 2 times when I am not going to be doing visits. First, if there's any chance that the recruit is going to commit before the visit even takes place. If the guy is locked into his top 3 and making progress towards a commitment, why in the world would I schedule a week 14 visit when we're in week 9? That 40-hour upfront payment that you make in week 9 isn't going to make any impact on the actual recruiting battle, and then by the time the visit comes in week 14, it's too late. He's already committed somewhere. I've made that mistake one too many times, and I'm not doing it anymore. And finally, this may be controversial, but I think this experiment has ended any shot of me scheduling any visits on bye weeks, unless EA changes the visit logic in the future. At least if you do a visit when there's an actual game, you have the upside of a potential win, but a bye week seems to be just considerably worse than 25 hours, kind of regardless of what you do. I think I'm actually going to try and schedule my bye weeks at the very start and very end of the year when I know I don't want to be doing visits anyways. That way I'm not even in a position to where I could do it on a bye week if I wanted to. I'd much rather have visits in week 4 against an FCS school than week 5 in a bye week. So that is everything I currently know about visits, how valuable they could be, and my personal strategy for how I'm going to use them going forward. As always, thank you so much for watching. I know it's been a few weeks since we did an experiment like this, so really glad to be back. I do have a massive one next week that I might need your help in. So hopefully I see you soon, but until then, happy recruiting. Peace out.